Well, that didn't take long.
No one sets the tone more than the President of the United States. And the tone that he sets is one of division, often one of hatred.
This has now become a struggle about good versus evil, and the President of the United States is evil.
This man the flames of his hatred were fanned by a president who kept talking about this caravan of refugees as if they were terrorists.
So as they blame Trump's words for violence, do they realize they're excusing the violent acts themselves while offering a case for leniency for the actual perps? If the actions of evildoers are out of their own control and nothing else could have led to the violence, then how can you even begin to punish these creeps? It's wrong. Meanwhile, for both the bomber and the shooter, President Trump, Mr. Law and Order, pushes the death penalty. There is no ambiguity there. He places the blame firmly on the dirtbags, and like most Republicans, seeks out the stiffest penalty, literally the stiffest. This contradicts the media, who see Trump as a hateful ringleader who sympathizes with such cretins. Speaking of those suspects, they were total losers, failures in life who placed their rage on others. And anyone with an opinion could provide a trigger. Because words can influence. It's why there's advertising. But that's a scary path to take, especially for Hollywood, rap stars, and video game makers, or even people paid to speak carefully and thoughtfully.
The President of the United States is racist.
Even Albert Einstein may have ended up in a Nazi concentration camp with Donald Trump's viewpoint on immigration.
If you vote for Trump, then you, the voter, you, not Donald Trump, are standing at the border like Nazis going, you here, you here.
So you want hate? You spend 2 years calling a guy Hitler, a racist, a traitor, and insane. Then you blame him for violence because of nicknames? No lectures from you, kids. But even more, to cite words as the cause eliminates the suspect's entire history and the slew of variables that brought him to commit his crimes. It makes no sense legally or morally, but politically, I guess that's another story. After all, why let a crisis go to waste? Except that you'll make another one far worse. All right, Lisa, they didn't waste any time. I mean, I guess we saw it coming, that they would pin the blame on Trump.
Well, absolutely, if you've been paying any attention to the media since President Trump even announced. But look, there's obviously a complete double standard in the media. We know this. When something happens to Republicans, the media and the left say that we need to have civility on both sides. When something happens and is directed at Democrats, it is purely Republican and President Trump's fault. But it's also just intellectually dishonest, because if you look at the mail bombing suspect, this guy has a rap sheet going back to 1991. He made a bombing terrorist threat in 2002. And then if you look at the synagogue shooting, this guy hated President Trump because he didn't think he was an anti-Semite. So if you actually look at the facts, it doesn't drive the narrative that the media is driving. But the only reason they do it is because the midterms are around the corner and they want to hurt President Trump.
Juan, can I play Sarah Sanders responding to a reporter about this whole mess? Go.
Why is he out there? When you say he's trying to unite the country, why is he out there
the very
making
first thing that the president did was condemn the attacks both in Pittsburgh and in the pipe bombs. The very first thing the media did was blame the president and make him responsible for these ridiculous acts. You can't start putting the responsibility of individuals on anybody but the individual who carries out the crime. He's delivered on the promises he's made, and if anything, I think it is sad and divisive the way that every single thing that comes out of the media, 90% of what comes out of the media's mouth is negative about this president.
So, Juan, my question to you is, I think you can hold two opinions, that Trump's discourse, you will say, is divisive, and I can say that because he's pugnacious, so you know it's divisive, but that also mass killers are responsible for their actions alone. Don't you think that tying that together and putting it on him is politically opportunistic?
Politically opportunistic.
I led you with the answer.
No, but I want to engage you seriously because I think this is such a serious topic. But I think that you're right. There are two thoughts, and they can be held simultaneously.
Right.
In other words, that in fact you have to hold the culprit responsible for his individual action. It's also the case that the president engages in divisive speech. And that's the problem here. I think that he's upped the ante in terms of that divisive speech. So part of it, and what I heard in your monologue and from Lisa is blame the press, that the press is not fair to him, and he's gone back now to the press is the enemy of the people. But I think this goes, from my perspective, beyond that, because his rhetoric is so intense that I think it has, sort of created an atmosphere of more kind of dissonance and vitriol than we're accustomed to. To my mind, what we've seen the last week or so, it makes me wonder, is this America? How did we get to this point? And then over the weekend, just put me aside, because I just worry that, say, oh, well, that's Juan Williams, there's the press again. But here, 35,000 people, Greg, saying the president will not be welcome in Pittsburgh unless he denounces white nationalism. And here's words from this group. This is a Jewish group, Bend the Arc. They say, for the past 3 years, your words, your policies have emboldened a growing white nationalist movement. You yourself call the murderer evil, but yesterday's violence is the direct culmination of your influence.
Okay, I don't know much about that group, but I do know, I think we have tape from CNN when they were actually asking the specific rabbi from that synagogue about whether Trump was welcome there. I think we have that. I'm talking slow enough so you can set it up. Would that work?
President Trump has talked about coming to Pittsburgh and coming to your synagogue in the aftermath of this. Do you want him to come?
The president of the United States is always welcome. I'm a citizen. He's my president. He's certainly welcome.
There you go. Kilmeade, what are your thoughts on what, if you care to respond to Juan about his feelings?
I don't know any of those groups.
Okay.
I don't know any of those groups, but it sounds like Democratic talking points. Sounds like something Tom Steyer said on CNN on Sunday, who I didn't ever see talk besides the ads that he bought and the money he made. I was just stunned. If you asked me when this happened, first the bombers discovered to the shooting at the synagogue, I thought maybe by Sunday, on a Sunday show, some pundit looking to get a network contract would go ahead and say, I think the president's to blame. I did not know the same night, the same day, within an hour, they said, ha, look at what you see. What the president does, and it works to his detriment, is he watched everybody talk about all this. And it had him seething, as if we were sitting outside the glass listening to the five talk about us. For him, he's listening to this, and he's outraged. So what does the president do? Exactly what he did his entire life at the Trump Organization, as a candidate and as a president. I'm going to go tweet out. I'm going to speak out. You guys are blaming me for this. You're making it worse. The way you treat me has my 60 million who voted for me and maybe more seething, ready to go. Now, that has nothing to do with that lunatic in Florida and that nutcase in Pittsburgh. But I do think that there's a sense out there that Trump and his supporters have been categorized like as white nationalists because they voted for him, and they're tired of it, and he's speaking for them.
I don't think it's about voting for him. I think that if you look back at some of the actions, not only the bomber and then the shooter, but I mean, go back to Charlottesville, Proud Boys, and all this kind of stuff, that there's a growing white nationalist rage in this country, and people are like, whoa.
You do realize, though, that President Trump's daughter is Jewish. His son-in-law is Jewish. His grandchildren are Jewish. I actually think President Trump has a special spot in his heart for the Jewish community. You see that in his actions as well, moving the embassy to Jerusalem, being the first sitting president to visit the Western Wall. So I think that is often not talked about in this national dialogue is the fact that this is so close to the president.
One of the things, Lisa, that really bugged me about Charlottesville, everybody put it in terms of the Confederate statues, black, white, but they had guys with tiki torches and automatic weapons standing outside a synagogue, so the Jewish people had to exit through the back door. And those same guys said, oh, what a shame that Mr. Trump would allow his beautiful daughter to marry a Jew.
They were universally condemned.
Let me get Dana in here. The media, oddly enough, didn't mind Louis Farrakhan's tweets earlier this week where he compared Jews to termites, but we'll not go there. You had Andrew McCarthy on your show, and I made a really important point that back in the 70s, the United States was a much smaller country. I don't know how many by millions, but had many, many more of these kinds of attacks. So
and in fact, it was the New York Times yesterday had this amazing report. It was it was on their website, like really well done. I'd point anyone to it. It was actually talking about 1968 because it was the 50th anniversary. And we're looking at this now that in 1968, just how divisive things were. I do think we all have to keep in mind that keeping a red line between speech and violence is really important. That's how America was founded.
Exactly.
I also feel like the president could figure out a way to read the room a little better, and that mean like the country, right? Like take a couple minutes, like tap the brakes just a little bit, because for better or worse, people tend to look up to leaders. and they want to feel better about the moment. And if the moment becomes about him and the media's treatment of him, then we're just right back down into it. And then somebody's going to have to step forward and do something. Can I just add one last thing?
Sure.
I know we got to go. And that is the issue of radicalization of people. We've talked about this a lot during the war on terror. How does it happen, right? Well, you have hopeless people, purposeless people, people who are ignorant, and then they find purpose in something that they find somewhere now is online. So if you have radical Islamists, how do they find it? And there's something there's something. I don't necessarily think it's speech, but there is a culmination of it. And if you look at this guy's background, Boyer's background, he certainly had it, right? He turned evil and vile into violence. And what we should be talking about is what the president said is, I'll do everything in my power to stop it from happening again. Okay, so what is in your power to do? And that's some pretty uncomfortable conversations about privacy and the ability we can prosecute very well. What we don't seem to be able to do as well is to prevent.
Right, and you think about what prevented institutionalization was there for unstable individuals. We don't have that anymore. There are a lot of unsavory, unstable people. We don't know where to put them. And this other guy, the bomber, he was hiding in plain sight, apparently.
His 5 minutes before he left, he posted, I can't take this anymore, because he couldn't take any more refugees coming in, and supported by the Jewish community. So if it was 5 minutes before, it was from 5 minutes from posting to shooting.
Yeah.
As composed as Barack Obama is and his charismatic, great speech, I get it. But if he was blamed for the South Carolina shooting, for the Gabby Gifford shooting, if he was blamed for Sandy Hook, he might fly off the handle, too.
All right. Are you kidding me? What you got there is a contrast between someone who talked about hope and change and someone who presses the fear button and demonizes the immigrant caravan and then opens the door to suggestions that Jews are somehow responsible for the caravan.
It's not the language. We got to go.